Now, what's your name? Marcus Jones?
Yeah.
And you're doing this report for Wild, is that right?
Yeah.
WILD?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the reports aired on Thursday. Yeah. 2 hours, during 2 of the newscasts, 1 in the morning and in the afternoon. Would this bother you if I did this?
No,
Okay.
It won't bother me if it helps the quality of the broadcast.
Okay. I've written something I haven't had a chance to go over, so I may stumble through.
That's all right.
Let's see. Now, I wanted to know to what you attribute the response you got from 60 Minutes, the favorable response.
Well, I think that the overwhelming response of the general public to 60 Minutes is not a surprise, because the American people see quite clearly what has happened in higher education. They have lost respect for students who have stopped studying and taking their educational opportunities seriously, and who simply come to college in order to engage in riotous activity. They've stopped taking professors seriously, who engage in a lot of ideological claptrap instead of engaging in serious instruction. The college professoriate is running the risk of losing the public esteem and respect that it has enjoyed traditionally in the United States by losing an uncompromising fidelity to truth. When the American professor decides that he can shave the truth, that he can bear false witness for a political cause, the American public are going to lose their respect. The same response that I've had from the viewers of 60 Minutes, and by this time, incidentally, I've had 1,600 letters, and only 3 out of 1,600 have been negative. All of that support is of the same sort that I get from taxi cab drivers and from people in grocery stores and in shopping centers around Boston. And one taxi cab driver told me, he said, "I'm not going to bother to spend $5,000 to send my kid to college because I don't think the professors are good enough." Now, fortunately, that is still a minority opinion. Most American families believe the professors are good enough, and the overwhelming majority of professors are. Nearly all college professors are highly dedicated, highly intelligent, hardworking men and women who really care about young people. But there are a handful who are trying to do nothing but tear up the campuses of America, who don't care anything for truth, who have no high principles at all, and who are engaged in simply political and ideological purposes. And those people are undermining the self-respect Americans have traditionally had for higher education.
But on this campus, you seem to disapprove of a good number, not a good number, I should say, of that tiny minority I keep reading about. I was reading some of the Free Press articles.
About 10.
What can be done about something like that? If there are bad professors, I mean, they're teaching the students, and but you can't advise people not to come.
The correction of the professors who, in my judgment, are not fulfilling their responsibilities are very small in number. We have 2,200 faculty members at Boston University, and I don't think there's more than 10 to 15 of them who are not serving their students well. Those 10 to 15, it seems to me, should be examined and reviewed by their faculty colleagues. I don't think it's the job of the president to step down into a political science department and to ask what's going on and why aren't academic standards being upheld? Why aren't grades being handed out objectively on the basis of a very high fulfillment of academic assignments? Why aren't the lectures being given with maximum objectivity and maximum competence? Those are questions for faculty to ask of themselves. And I try to set the standard, I try to articulate the standard, but the enforcement of those standards should be a matter of rational persuasion between one faculty member and another. Despite the fact that this handful of faculty make a lot of noise and manage to create a great impression among the media, they aren't persuading very many people of what they're about, and their influence on the students is very small compared to the influence of the other 2,200 professors.
Now, you say you have received at this time over 1,600. Is that 1,600 to you personally, or is that 1,600 to 60 Minutes and to you?
Well, I don't know what 60 Minutes has received because they don't send those things out. Some of the communications I have received have been copies of letters to 60 Minutes. Other letters addressed to me have copied 60 Minutes. So there is certainly an overlap, I would say, of at least a third of the letters that have come to me have gone to 60 Minutes. But 60 Minutes have reported that they've had one of the largest mail responses they've had in years, and that their response has been more than 9-to-1 in support of the position that I have taken.
Now, does it bother you to know that that number, that, well, you call it a tiny minority, I don't know if it's 10 that are against you, it may be a bit more considering some of the votes that have been taken.
The votes that are taken are easily explained by the fact that academics take for granted that their colleagues are going to tell the truth. And they haven't bothered to notice that they've been lied to by some professors of reputation.
So it doesn't bother you to know that some faculty members have expressed no confidence in, and that, like...
No, how would they be in a position to judge? What would qualify them? You show me a petition here signed by Mr. Luria.
Mr. Luria. Your own faculty members first, and then I was wondering what you thought about.
Well, my own faculty, some of my own faculty are in exactly the same position that Mr. Luria is in. They haven't examined the records. I could have them sit down and write an examination paper on the various charges that have been raised in these petitions. One of them says that, for example, that this administration has reduced the number of faculty and increased, in order to increase the size of the administration. The administrative budget takes up exactly the same percentage of the total budget of Boston University as it did in 1971 when I came here. The faculty at Boston University is larger now than it was when I came here. One of the petitions that was circulated by 6 members of the faculty of Boston University says that we've decreased the resources of the library. All you have to do is take a measuring rod and you can find out that the libraries at Boston University now are substantially larger in the number of square feet, substantially larger in the number of volumes, and that the operating budget of the libraries at Boston University is substantially increased. Yet those petitions asserted just the contrary, and those petitions lied. Now, I think that many professors who voted this way believe that the people who sent around those petitions knew what they were talking about. But as a matter of fact, they didn't. They simply lied to their colleagues and misled their colleagues. And all you have to do is examine the facts. Once you examine the facts, you find out those things are false.
Now, I would assume that after all of this, the years of turmoil, that you take this all for granted now, and it doesn't bother you at all.
I accept that a very high level of abuse goes with being an honest college president. That's right.
And it is worth the abuse.
What's that?
It is worth the abuse.
I think that trying to transform Boston University into a great institution and trying to maintain at Boston University uncompromising intellectual and academic integrity and fiscal soundness so that the 5,500 employees of Boston University will have a job, not today, but tomorrow and 10 years from now and 20 years from now, and the obligations that we have to them and their children will be fulfilled, is a job that is very worthwhile, yes.
Now, during the 60 Minute spot, you also said something to the effect that when it's time for you to leave, you hope that you can do so knowing that you have left Boston University considerably more solvent and academically better than when you came. Have you not accomplished this already?
Oh, I think I've accomplished this already, but it doesn't mean that I couldn't leave Boston University. But a lot remains to be done at Boston University. We've made a very good start, but there are substantial improvements yet to be made. Sure. I mean, I think that a great deal has been accomplished at Boston University. It has a national reputation that it never had before. It is an institution of very high quality, and it is recognized as an institution of very high quality. Nobody would suggest today that Boston University is a streetcar college, which was the term of description that was commonplace here some years ago. Very few people would confuse Boston University today with Boston College. There is a lot more than just the Protestant Reformation that separates those two institutions at the present time. The eminence of our programs in medicine, in law, in fine arts, in engineering, in the allied health professions, in nursing, in philosophy, in English, in history, in economics, particularly in development economics. All of those are achievements and centers of excellence for anyone to see who wants to look at it. That is a national and international reputation that Boston University now has.
So those opponents of you and those detractors have a long time to wait before you decide to leave.
No, I don't know the future, but I assume so. They're certainly not going to run me off. And the reason they can't run me off is because they lie. What they have not yet discovered is that truth is power. If any one of the charges that were leveled against me and my administration had been true, the trustees would have fired me long ago. And the reason that they have stopped taking those charges seriously is because they're so nonsensical. They're just idiotic. Like that idiotic statement made by Professor Luria, who suggested that we had taken disciplinary action against 6 professors over the sympathy strike activity last September. Now, as a matter of fact, I assume Mr. Luria can count up to 6. If he can, he's made a mistake because there were only 5 professors against whom disciplinary action was taken. Now, there's no doubt that Luria can count successfully up to 6. The fact is, what that shows is he didn't know what he was talking about. Here, a distinguished professor, in abject ignorance of what's going on at Boston University, was sold a bill of goods by some friends of his on our faculty. It was reported in the Globe by George Higgins that Howard Zinn persuaded him to go along with this. Another report had it that Frida Rebelsky did. Whoever was involved, some friends of his at Boston University, among those dissident professors, sold Mr. Luria a bill of goods. And so he signed his name to a document that is full of nonsensical statements. It is, among other things, nothing better than a bill of attainder. And yet, Mr. Luria sent out that letter of his and that petition under the notion that he wanted to protect civil liberties. Well, bills of attainder are about as reprehensible as anything one can pass around. And so here is Luria trying to support civil liberties, engaged in circulating a bill of attainder, where you take a vote in order to prove that somebody is guilty of wrongdoing. You don't prove that somebody's guilty of wrongdoing by taking a vote. You do that by bringing in the evidence. And far from having any evidence, he can't even get his numbers right. No, this is, I should think, a source of very grave embarrassment to Professor Luria and to however many professors signed it with him. Because what they did was put their name down in support of a series of false allegations about which they had made no independent investigation and about which they were totally and abjectly ignorant.
I was wondering, do you think the media, the liberal media, as you put in, I would assume...
I didn't say anything about liberal media. That's a word that you used. I didn't use that.
Okay. Now, you have to understand that my sources are the sources that have been molding the minds of a lot of the people that you say are ignorant to some of the true facts. I've read articles in the Globe and in the Herald, and I would consider those liberal media. Would you not?
Well, I have never heard a Hearst newspaper described as liberal. The Herald American is a Hearst newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was the Herald.
May be a very fine newspaper, but I did not know that Hearst newspapers were thought to be liberal newspapers.
Hearst newspapers?
Yes.
Yellow journalism newspapers?
Well, you're not talking about William Randolph Hearst. He's been in his grave a moldering for, a long, long time. Mm-hmm. You're talking about the Hearst chain of newspapers at the present time, which have been, for the most part, relatively conservative.
Okay.
They have endorsed almost every Republican candidate for president. as I understand it, for the last few years. They were not very enthusiastic about Roosevelt. They certainly weren't enthusiastic about Truman. No, I was not aware that maybe the Hearst newspapers are liberal. I don't know, but I hadn't thought they were.
Well, if that's the case, then all I was going to ask was whether or not you thought that the media and the various academic sectors that seem to oppose you are opposing you more because of your harsh style, as opposed to your policy.
Well, I don't think they know anything about my style. How do people who've never met me know about my style?
Now, I read an article. I can't remember what date it was exactly. I think it was, I'm sure it was in December. It was in the Herald, and it said John Silber Urging the Liberals or something like that. Do you recall that article?
Yeah, I recall that article.
And then it had another article where it had...
Oh, anybody who's genuinely a liberal is very likely to irk a fake liberal. And being a genuine liberal who has supported the integration of the University of Texas when I was an assistant professor, not protected by tenure. And that was not last week. That was in 1955, 1956, 1957, right on up to 1967, when I organized the Minority Scholarship Fund at the University of Texas and raised $80,000 from the faculty of the College of Arts and Sciences at Texas in order to gain a threefold matching from the federal government. When I was involved in all those things and involved as the first chairman of the Society to Abolish Capital Punishment in the state of Texas, and came up to Massachusetts on 2 occasions to testify before the legislature of the state of Massachusetts in opposition to capital punishment. Those are all activities that establish my credentials as a genuine liberal. I worked hard on the developing stages of Operation Head Start. I have worked and supported the integration of the public schools here in Boston under the Phase 2 plan, and I wrote an article that was published in the Herald American, by the way, on that subject, urging full compliance and, more than that, positive support by the colleges and universities and by all citizens in the Boston area of Phase 2. All of those activities are a part of my record as a genuine liberal. Now that must bother some of the phony liberals, because one of the fundamental aspects of being a liberal is that you insist on respecting free speech and an open campus. So when Professor Bronfenbrenner had his lecture disrupted at MIT and was invited to come give a lecture at Boston University, the so-called liberals, the fake liberals at Boston University, came to me and said, oh, there's going to be trouble, so we should cancel his lecture. And I said, no, we won't cancel his lecture. What I will do is I will have 30 police officers in that lecture hall to see to it that anybody who tries to break up that meeting and to deny Professor Bronfenbrenner his right of free speech on this campus will be evicted from the hall. We will use the civilized authority of government to protect the rights of citizens. And we kept that meeting open, and Bronfenbrenner gave his speech. Now, when the Marines wanted to recruit on campus and the Navy wanted to recruit on campus, we called the police to keep the placement office open. And we did not allow a handful of self-anointed persons who wanted to change not merely the foreign policy of the United States, but who wanted to change the right of free assembly and the right of access and to abolish the laws prohibiting trespass. We prevented those individuals from having their way. We just called the police, had them arrested, and sent off to jail.
Now, I'm not attacking your liberalism. What I was concerned with was whether or not you think those people that have dissenting opinions and who oppose some of your, who apparently on the surface oppose your policies, are not in fact opposing your personality.
No, I think what they're opposing is the fact that they haven't been able to take over Boston University and run me off. It has become a very popular sport among a handful of professors and the students that they could recruit to try to get rid of college presidents. They ran Kerr off from Berkeley. They ran Kirk off from Columbia. They ran off Perkins at Cornell. They ran off Summerskill at San Francisco State. They ran off my predecessor at Boston University, Mr. Chris Janer, the nicest man you'd ever hope to meet, pleasant, amiable.
That brings up another point.
So you see, these people tried to get rid of my predecessor. As soon as I hit the campus, they were all set to try to get rid of me. Well, I don't intend to be run out of town by a lot of vigilantes who try to pretend that they're liberals. They aren't liberals, they're totalitarians. They're going to say that Boston University will be run their way, or it won't run at all.
See, that's another thing. That's your style. You seem to be digging in and preparing for a fight, or just continuing to
No, I just, I'm not digging in, preparing for any fight. I just don't run.
Okay.
I mean, surely there's got to be some difference. I haven't taken the fight to them. They took the fight to me.
Are you trying to say that those other college professors ran?
No, I'm saying that they didn't have the stomach for the fight. This is a very different thing. When President Kirk became president of Columbia, it was a dignified job. There's damn little dignity left in being a college president. If you're not prepared to accept a very high level of personal abuse, you'd better stay out of a college presidency these days, because the students have lost the most elementary level of civility, some of them. And a handful of faculty have lost any reasonable level of civility. And unfortunately, the great majority of faculty who are still highly civil, polite, proper individuals do not speak out to condemn or to censure in any way their colleagues who are abusive. And so now if you want to be a college president, you have to accept that. No, I don't mean that those other college presidents were not courageous. I think Clark Kerr is a perfectly courageous man. I just think that he felt that there was a level of abuse he wasn't going to put up with. Now, I decided that in this generation, there better be a few individuals who will take that abuse and stop the nonsense.
You know, that brings to mind something that I was thinking of before I came here. The MLK Center, which was formed under your predecessor, was formed more or less out of a protest and a seizure of this office. John Silber wouldn't have put up for that.
No, but John Silber would have had an enlightened race policy here long before there was any protest. There's one thing that you will have a hard time finding. You just look at all the pictures of all the riots that have taken place on Boston University since I came and count the number of black students involved. You'll find a singular lack of them, because the black students on this campus know perfectly well where I stand. And they know perfectly well that we're putting scholarship money behind black students. We vigorously recruit black students, not for educational programs where they're not going to go anywhere, but educational programs like engineering, nursing, allied health professions, where when they complete that program, they can get a job. They also know that I don't accept those funny white forms of so-called racial enlightenment, which are really forms of racism. I expect a black student to be able to read and write and to do full college-level work. The people who have washed away all standards for black students in the name of enlightenment are actually the worst racists going. They're the people who act as if black students aren't smart enough to meet the standards of what used to be white colleges. Now, I know perfectly well that black students are smart enough to do full college-level work. And consequently, when I came in here, I said, we're going to put a stop to admitting black students who can't do college-level work. If we admit a black student without an adequate record, we're going to put him into a remedial program until he has achieved a level suitable for a college education. And if we continue him at Boston University, it is going to be because he has passed college-level work. So that when we graduate that black student, we're going to graduate somebody who can succeed in life, not somebody who is just mad as hell because he's got a fake degree. Now, I have found that black students aren't offended when you treat them directly and honestly. I correct a black student's English because it is not important for him to learn how to speak ghetto English. He already knows how to do that. It is important that a black student learn how to speak English the way an educated white person speaks English, so that he will not be subjected to what George Bernard Shaw called verbal class distinction. It is a cheap shot for a well-established white student to protect himself against downward mobility by trying to encourage black students to just keep on talking the ghetto English so that he doesn't have to worry about competing with them for a job. The pass-fail movement was a lovely trick that the middle class tried to play on the black students. Get rid of all the grades, boys. We don't want to differentiate between A, B's, and C's. So when the jobs are handed out on graduation from law school, the old boy network will take care of us, and those black boys won't have any record that they can stand on. And they'll be left high and dry, just another one of those pass-fail characters, just like me. I'm pass-fail, the black students pass-fail, so who's going to get the job? Now, if you had grades in there, and that black student came out with all A's and B's, he's going to get the job instead of that white kid who came out with all C's. But they really tried to trick what they referred to as their black brothers. You remember all those white folks talking about their black brothers? That was a con game, and one of the most shameful con games that was ever pulled by a white man on a black man. Now, I didn't have any part to that. I didn't take any part in it. I have spoken consistently against that kind of nonsense and will continue to do so. And I think the black students at Boston University know that. And they figure that I've got my act together. That's the way one of them described it. That man's got his act together. And they know perfectly well that I respect them and that I will not patronize them. I will not say something that black students want me to say. Jingoism is something that I am not going to engage in. But what the black students at Boston University discovered is that I'm not good on jingoism, and that I'm not going to play around with funny little cliches. I'm not going to go around talking about what Martin thought when Martin was in jail with me down in Alabama. Martin Luther King is one of the great moralists in the history of the United States, the most distinguished alumnus, I suppose, of Boston University. Now, my respect for Martin Luther King is such that I've used his materials in my classes for 15 years when I was teaching ethics, and I never met the man, and so consequently I don't refer to him as Martin. But how many of the white professors around here who don't know him from Adam refer to him as Martin, and what they and Martin did down there in Alabama? Well, I don't believe black students are much persuaded by that kind of stuff, and that's why I think black students know that if they come to my office and want to talk to me about something serious, they'll get a serious and straight answer, and consequently they don't engage in all that fluff stuff that goes on under the Young Spartacus League and the Young Communist Alliance that are out there on an ideological hip.
Now, I hate to keep dwelling on this because this wasn't one of what I was going on, but now that we're on that, I was wondering, do you think the Martin Luther King Center is doing a job that it's supposed to do? And what in your opinion, is the Martin Luther King supposed to do? Well, is it necessary, more or less?
I think to the extent, the more successful the Martin Luther King Center becomes, the less necessary it becomes. Because what it is concerned to do is to reduce the problems faced by minority students when they come to Boston University. Now, under its leadership over the last 8 years, it has extended its concern beyond black students to all minority students. And it still, I think, does its best job and its central job with black students, but it has a concern and has worked with Puerto Rican students, with Asian students, with students from the Middle East and from Africa, and I think has tried to do a very good job. One thing I'm very impressed by is the orientation programs that are offered by the Martin Luther King Center. They're the best orientation programs for freshmen offered at Boston University. No white student receives anything like it, so good an orientation as a minority student who attends the orientation programs of the Martin Luther King Center. One of their programs has to do with the development of skills in reading and mathematics, writing and areas of that sort. I think they've done a very good job in those areas. Now, to the extent that the high school preparation of our minority students increases, the need for that kind of program decreases. So I hope that there's a day coming when there won't be any real purpose for the Martin Luther King Center. But I don't think we've reached that point yet. I think that we are 10 to 20 years away from the point that we don't need some institution on this campus to be concerned with a better understanding between the races and concerned to assist minority students in becoming acclimatized to Boston University so that they can derive the maximum benefit from it.
Now, I think you're aware that some students may fear you, not physically or anything of that nature, but they have a respect for your power and your intelligence, and that intimidates them in some students. And I was wondering whether or not intimidation is a deliberate tactic.
No, of course not. And intimidation is something in the eye of the beholder. You know, every child often finds that he's intimidated by his father. But the day comes when he's going to have to stand up to Dad and become a man. Well, unfortunately, it has become a habit in American family life to delay that beyond the time that the child goes off to college, so that perhaps the first male adult that the child has to stand up to and become a man before ends up as the college president. That's unfortunate. It should have happened a long time ago at age 13, 14, or 15, 16, 17, or God help us, 18, but sometime before the student came to Boston University as a freshman. Now, I address students as adults. I'm not going to treat them as if they were 9 or 10 years old in short pants so that I have to patronize them. I'm not their father. I'm going to address them as if they were adults. I'm going to assume that they are adults, and consequently that they can stand and address another human being on their own feet as an independent person. Now, by doing so, if they've never done it before, they may find that they are very frightened. If they are, they must screw their courage to the sticking place and get over it. I wouldn't help them by reducing my expectations of them. I help them by giving them this hurdle to clear. And I find that most of them clear it. For example, you seem to be surviving very well. Now, if you can survive it very well, why shouldn't we expect all your classmates to survive it? The ordeal is not very painful. Nobody has shed blood as a consequence. There haven't been any teeth lost. No arms and legs have been broken. So this is a relatively mild thing. So far, I've managed to meet about 1,000 students every year at Boston University. There's not a single casualty among them. So I think that the kind of fright or fear or social distress that the young person feels when he meets the president of Boston University is perfectly normal and something that they ought to try out and get over. I know the first time I met a president of the United States, I don't think I was intimidated, but I certainly was a little ill at ease, and it was a good thing to get over. But I think it would have been ridiculous for me to say that the president was trying to intimidate me. He wasn't trying to intimidate me. He was trying not to, if anything. But whether or not one is intimidated depends more on the individual than it does on the person he's talking to.
Now, this fall, students are going to be hit with an astronomical increase.
No, not astronomical. Astronomical is hyperbole. It is an exaggeration. They're going to be hit with an increase of $795.
That's pretty good.
That is a large increase. But the tuition at Boston University next year will be about $500 lower than Harvard's. It will stay in roughly the same place comparatively with Harvard, Tufts, Brown, Brandeis, Boston College, and others as it has right now.
But my question continues now you're going to have that increase, but I'm curious as to whether or not is there an end in sight? Is Boston University going to price itself out of the market?
Oh, that's possible, not only for Boston University, but for all independent higher education. I think there's a very real risk that we will all price ourselves out of the market. You ask, is there any end in sight? I don't know. Is there any end in sight with regard to the failure of the federal government to come to terms with inflation? The inflationary problem was not created at Boston University. It was created in Washington. And Washington ought to balance its budget. Washington ought to engage in those policies that will bring this inflationary spiral to an end. Washington should now be developing energy resources in this country. Nuclear energy, hydrogenation of coal, These energy sources should be developed as quickly as possible so that our dependence upon foreign oil can be substantially reduced. We should allow the price of gasoline to go up to $2.50 a gallon, the way it has been for years in Europe, and that's the best and easiest way to ration gasoline. People will use their automobiles much less, they will walk more, they will catch the bus and the train more frequently if they know that the cost of using the automobile is substantially higher. Or they will start riding in carpools as we did in the Second World War. Those steps have not been taken by the federal government. And until they are taken, we're not going to get the budgetary problem, the inflationary problem, under control. If the nation does not solve the inflation problem, there is no way Boston University can.
Now, isn't Boston University also possibly facing the prospect of pricing itself out of the market in terms of service provided for the?
No, I don't think so. I think that Boston University is much stronger.
You rank it with Harvard, and you rank it with other Ivy League schools that have.
Let us dispel the general student ignorance over the Ivy League. The Ivy League is a football conference. Okay. Line up the faculty of Brown University and the faculty of Boston University. Brown's medical school is not even in the same league with Boston University's medical school. Its dental school does not even exist. Its school for the arts is nothing comparable to Boston University. Bring to Boston Brown University's symphony orchestra. I don't even think it has one. But certainly it has never been invited to compete in the Funkarian Festival in Berlin, and it hasn't won a silver medal there. Neither has any symphony orchestra from Harvard or from MIT or from Yale or from Williams or from Dartmouth or from Amherst, or from Columbia. Look, you see, I know too much about higher education to be snowed by a little title like Ivy League. There are excellent universities in the Ivy League, and there are moderately good universities in the Ivy League, than which Boston University is substantially better. Boston University is not as distinguished a collection of scholars and collections of books and libraries as is Harvard. That's true. But Boston University is superior to Harvard in many respects. We have a superior dental school. We have a superior school for allied health professions. We have a vastly superior program in orchestra and music, and in theater, and in painting and sculpture. We have a better philosophy department, in my opinion. We have a very fine English department that is surely comparable to Harvard's. We've got a splendid program in archaeology, not necessarily better than Harvard's, but fully comparable. We have a vastly better program in development economics. Harvard is superior to us in economic theory, but not in development economics. Our departments of biology and chemistry and physics are very strong undergraduate departments, but they are not as distinguished as Harvard's. But you have to pick and choose between the programs. On the other hand, I don't think there's a single area, or not certainly most of the areas in which Boston University works and Brown University works, Boston University is superior. And that certainly holds true of Amherst and Williams and Dartmouth and in many of the programs at Yale, many of the programs at Columbia. So let's cut this nonsense. See, I'm not going to be snowed by Ivy League. It's a football conference that I would like to see Boston University become a part of. And Boston University can play better football than many of the schools in the Ivy League. But the Ivy League is not a group of colleges and universities selected for their academic excellence. It is a group of colleges and universities that got together to play football. And the sooner the students figure that out, the better.
Now, I wasn't really going into that because I heard you give that same statement last year at Warren Towers when you talked about the Groucho Marx syndrome. Now, what I really was concerned about was, now I know that BU is supposedly, by your statement, has superior programs in nursing and medicine and dental and all that, but there are other areas, the undergraduate areas that you didn't mention, that students could go elsewhere for. And I was wondering whether or not with BU's increases whether or not it's going to alienate a market that it traditionally had.
Compared to what? It's not going to alienate anybody that the other schools aren't going to alienate. Many of the programs I mentioned are undergraduate programs. The programs in fine arts are undergraduate as well as graduate.
I mean, BU has they have 16 schools in college.
That's right, and many of the excellent programs. Philosophy is undergraduate, English is undergraduate, allied health professions is undergraduate, nursing is undergraduate, fine arts is undergraduate. So we've talked a lot about undergraduate programs. Now, Boston University has a superior undergraduate medical program, pre-med program. The 6-year pre-medical program is as fine as any in the nation. There's nothing comparable to that at Harvard. We're not going to lose any enrollment in that program. Our undergraduate program in engineering is excellent. I don't think we're going to have any trouble on that. We do not have a distinguished graduate program in engineering, but our undergraduate program in engineering is excellent. We have a very strong school of education. Now, it's not going to do very well in the next few years because the jobs are going to be in short supply in education at the primary and secondary level for another 10 years.
How are you going to compensate for something like that?
Well, the way we have done it, we've reduced the size of our school of education almost 50%. And we've increased the size of our school of engineering almost threefold. Our engineering school is substantially larger than it used to be. And our programs in science and engineering and the professionally oriented programs have obviously increased to take up the slack that has resulted from the decline in education. But every university and college is going to raise its price. Boston University has announced its tuition increase for next year. We announced it, $795 increase in tuition. They haven't announced it at Tufts. They haven't announced it at Brandeis. Wait a couple of weeks. You'll find that they're all going to have to go up in order to have balanced budgets. Or they can play the game that Columbia played, and it's had deficits in about 12 out of the last 14 years. And as a result, at Columbia, they have consumed, lost $85 million of their endowment. They have spent more of their endowment simply to balance their budget at Columbia University than Boston University even has an endowment. We have a $40 million endowment. Columbia consumed $85 million of its endowment simply to balance its budget. Boston University hasn't done that. We run on a balanced budget, and in the long run, it's going to make us stronger, not weaker, because $80 million in endowment will generate, about $6-7 million a year in income. You can buy a lot of excellence for $6 million a year.
Okay. Is there any comment that you would like to make before I turn off my tape recorder?
I'm very genuinely concerned about the enrollment of black students in our law school. And a time or two, the student who appeared on 60 Minutes didn't bother to mention that some of the students on whom I have intervened in the admissions to the law school have been black students, because I've been concerned about the relatively poor showing we've made in that law school in terms of the recruitment of black students. And I am concerned that number be increased. But is there any other...
There's no other area that I can think of. I hate to rehash things because I hate to have old news, but this is news that isn't... a lot of this stuff is kept mostly on the campus and so forth, and I think it would have general...
I think that Ron Carter did a superior job as the director of the Martin Luther King Center. And I think he and his staff are among the most dedicated and effective people I know. I have a very high regard for that program.
You know, the N.A.A.C.P has been concerned, the BU chapter of the N.A.A.C.P has been going through records that they've been able to get a hold of and asserting that BU has a poor record as far as affirmative action goes.
I'd like to know what the evidence for that is. See, for example, are they going to count the number of people that we have offered deanships at Boston University to, or only the number of blacks who've accepted them?
Can you give a reason why these people didn't accept?
Sure. We got them better jobs someplace else. For example, one person several years ago when the vacancy came in the deanship of Sargent College. This was about 7 years ago. We offered that position to a very distinguished black scientist in Washington, D.C. He was jumped 4 or 5 grades in civil service to one of the super grades, and to such a lucrative position we couldn't move him out of it. And that's why I turned it down. And it's for reasons like this. It's not because of any aversion to Boston University. It's because when a person is of exceptional quality, there are a lot of people who want them. Now, one thing I'm not going to do is I'm not going to appoint somebody that can't do the job. When a well-qualified black comes along, he certainly will be appointed, and we'll go out of our way looking for them too. And I've been concerned, for example, I have mentioned to the dean of the law school that I find it difficult to understand why we can't find an outstanding black grad law school faculty, and indeed more than one, because this is a field in which blacks have done very fine work. If you talk about let's say biochemistry, I don't think 3 blacks in the United States took PhDs last year in biochemistry. So now if you're saying, why don't we have a black biochemist, I'm going to tell you, because probably there isn't one available. Now you see, but what you have to do is you have to look field by field. On the other hand, there are fields in which there are highly qualified blacks available, and we certainly are concerned to recruit them in those areas.
But the thing I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier that there are professors here who don't meet the standards that you wish they did. And you say you have over 2,000 faculty members. Now, I'm sure that there are many more faculty members out there who aren't up to par. Why is it so important to find extremely outstanding black individuals when you have...
Well, I mean, you're talking about a pre-Silber era at Boston University. I don't hire any white that's not outstanding. I mean, certainly I'm not talking about a different standard of expectation for white professors and black professors at Boston University. Not at all. You know, you inherit the situation as it exists. The professors that, for the most part, I'm concerned about were appointed by my predecessor, not by me.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time.